Welcome to Spirit Baby Radio. I am your host, Kelly Meehan, a citizen of the universe and a passage keeper and mentor for our new Earth children. I believe we are entering into a new psychic structure of our reality, and it is meant to embody deeper trust and ways into solid self-love and fearless integrity. Our new world energy of spirit babies needs us to consciously create within conception, trust pregnancy, and have freedom to birth and parent from innate wisdom. This is Spirit Baby Radio. Welcome to episode 205, February 2025, Owning Your Birth and the Freedom to Align with New Earth Consciousness. What does it mean to tune into your birthing instincts? How does your baby experience the energy of birth? How can mothers ground into a holistic and natural birth in the world today? I have a special guest. Obviously, if you're watching it on video, you can see her, but if you can't hear her, it's Anita. Hi, Anita.
Hi, Kelly.
And Anita, the Midwitch, she has her podcast that I was on, and I was like, oh my gosh, I want to have tea with this woman and like hang out, but she's on the other side of the planet. And I'm going to read a little bit more about Anita. She is a spiritual mentor, ceremonialist, woman's worker, birth worker, freedom birth mama of two new earth children, and energy healer. Founder of the intuitive birth method, known as the spiritual prenatal care, the Midwitch podcast, which gets over 100,000 times downloaded, with an online community of over 20,000 women. Anita has spiritually mentored hundreds of women from all over the world in women's work, spiritual birth prep, conscious conception, wild pregnancy, free birth, birth work, and spiritual mothering over the last 10 years. She studied in energy work, Reiki Healing, Astrology, Human Design, Aromatouch Therapy, Tarot, Psychic Channeling, and Energetic Business Alignment, creating sold out digital offerings and masterclasses on lunar energy, women's cycles, abundance circles, and ceremony facilitation, birth and manifestation. She also brings the wisdom of mentoring under many global leaders within high investment containers, guest speaking on internationally renowned podcasts, and interviewing prominent figures with her own channel. And the Midwitch came up, I love the Midwitch, in 2019 as a vision of a woman that is deeply connected to nature, spirit, magic, quote, witch, or parentheses. This is also a guide of the void between two worlds, mid. Anita is here to ensure that mothers return to their power and the power to return to mothers. I love that. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me and for reading that out. It's funny when you hear it being read back to yourself.
Yeah, I think this is beautiful, great love, authentic accomplishments. And I want to hear more. We'll kind of jump in and see where we go with this because there's so many things I know we can talk about. And how, you have a lot of different stuff, of course, in your background. And what drove you into the birth energy is really my curiosity. What brought you here?
Yeah, that was definitely my daughter coming through. So before I was the midwitch, I was spirited space and I was doing a lot of energy healing, women's circles and readings. And the moment I found out I was pregnant with my daughter, maybe because I was having her a little later than maybe some of the women around me, I had watched them all move through what I had always thought of such a sacred process as, just coming out the other end with trauma. And there was just something really strong within me saying, I don't think it has to be this way. Like, and I've had that so many times in my life.
What, uh-oh, I think we're frozen.
So then I
There we go.
just kind of started following the breadcrumbs. And so that led me to kind of merging spirituality and birth. And like when I did it, I was like, of course. And so that, yeah, so then I moved through that with my daughter's pregnancy and then her birth. And just like it was so mind blowing to me how controversial it was to decide I was going to stay at home to birth. And I was like, I mean, I had, this is probably what leads me into like why I'm so passionate about women reclaiming birth, but it was. really, it really stemmed from my personal feelings towards the medical system and my distrust with them. And that started for me when I was very young. From age 5, I completely had this distrust and questioned their authority and did throughout the entirety of my life. And then so anyway, that led me to, yeah, of course, I'm like, I'll do anything to not have my baby there. That was kind of the feeling I had. And then obviously I had to work with that and go, okay, well, if I end up, I have to make peace with that timeline as well, or otherwise I'm going to manifest that. So anyway, yeah, did what I wanted to do with her birth. And then I was, you just have that feeling. You're like, I need to share this with other women. Like, this is a possibility. They at least need to know it's a possibility. And so, um, the way I started with that is going through kind of the mainstream routes, well, mainstream to me, and that was through hypnobirthing. But again, I didn't realize that that was even another like, oh, that's woo woo and controversial. I was like, really? It's not even like it still feels mainstream to me. So I started with hypnobirthing and then I Marie Mongan and her wisdom. She seemed like such a wise woman. And then unfortunately, she passed away not long after I did
Mm,
hypnobirthing and they changed everything. And it was gutting to me because I could see how this woman had this legacy. And then they just kept making this course more relatable to the hospital. And she was not
mm.
really about that. So anyway, that was like my first kind of entry point. And then I decided I didn't really align with that framework of teaching. And then I was like, well, I have this background knowledge now of doing that. And I've also moved through it myself. And I'm just going to share what I know and what I see and what I know I can help women with.
So how old were you? You said you were older, so how old were you with your daughter?
So I had her when I was 34.
Yeah, you're getting ancient up there for the medical world.
Yeah. Yeah. Geriatric, I think they
Oh
call it.
yeah, they do. They do.
Yeah.
And then that's amazing. I feel like that's how it happens. Like you're seeing women and then you're kind of opening up to that field and then your own experience. That was mine too, is like in the healing arts for a long time, doing a lot of different things. And then pregnancy brought this whole other level. It's like a whole other area.
Yeah.
So can you share anything come about your own spirit baby communication in pregnancy?
Yeah. I feel like I had well, no, I had both I had communication with both my children. My son is just was just much louder and much more uh for maybe someone that was starting out, like they would absolutely have heard him. My daughter was more subtle. That's how I would explain it. And
Mm,
she was kind of more about symbolism and maybe less like words. Um, and so that was, mostly through my pregnancy. And I guess that ties into also what I do now and what you were saying before, that I realized that wait a minute, pregnancy is actually a spiritual awakening.
mm.
Because that's what I had already had like, you know, several kind of awakenings and already had my kind of dark night of the soul, Saturn return, all of that. And but I had another one during pregnancy. So with her, yeah, I was using a lot of tools. So like it was more indirect. And I feel like sometimes that's important to tell like women as well, because I think if they have an expectation on what it sounds like or what it like comes through as, I think sometimes they can miss it, right? So with her, it was
Mhm.
a lot of journaling and meditation and messages through that way. Um, she was very like she is now like kind of to the book. So in that pregnancy, I did have a few appointments in the medical system and it was not what I wanted to do, but I could feel I feel like I kept feeling like it was this message from her of like it's just her energy now. Like let's just do it semi right. Um but then, when we went, like I said, when I think about my son and communicating, I mean, it was very auditory, very. And like a
Mm,
sentence he would say throughout my whole pregnancy was, please trust me. Like, please trust me. Please trust me. Like,
wow.
yeah, this really loud. And I'd be like, okay, even when I didn't, even when I wasn't in moments of doubt, like, or despair or whatever, it was just like, please trust me, like with
Did you
everything.
though? Did you listen to him?
I did
Oh,
because,
nice. Okay.
well, that's why that's not why I free birth, but that was, one of the things that made my foundation really strong around making that choice. If I ever wobbled, it would be, please trust me. And he was he had a
Wow.
very strong energy of like, hand it over to me, like hand it to me. And that was
Wow.
a massive thing for me because um I guess when I'm thinking about being pregnant with my daughter, it was like, well, I'm the mom. And it's hard to explain. I guess I had this moment when I was pregnant with him thinking like, I can't hand over my fears to a child, to a baby.
Wow.
And he
Yeah.
was just like, I'm not a baby. Like I'm this like massive spirit. I'm like highly intelligent kind of language.
Mm.
You can. Like this is, in the spirit world, this is nothing. Like just give it to me. And I was like, whoa, that I think that's when I developed like a next level um version of trust for my
Mm.
children of like, wow, they've kind of got it too. Like that, yeah, of course.
Wow, this is so powerful. There's a few things you said. I love this indirect communication. That feels really important because
Yeah.
sometimes women, especially women and men, are looking for like, where is it? Like it's gotta be some, and it's like, whoa, then you literally set yourself up for constant failure. But
Yeah.
that indirect kind of empathic, telepathic synergy that I feel like all mothers have with their children. It's just more of like calming down, listening, and then that connection just kind of flows. And I want to hear more. So I want to hear more about free birthing. And
Hmm.
I'm like really, I just want to say why I get excited about this. And I'm kind of zipping out, looking at the world, the energy, consciousness, the collective, it feels like we have to push for that free birth. Even though I know people are not in the energy space there enough. They're freaking out. They're coming back in this denser energy. And there's no judgment in hospital. Well, there's a little bit of judgment with hospital birth for me. Sorry. Um, center birth, home birth, free birth. And why is to me is like, if we're pushing for the most amazing, natural, self-sustainable, honest connection to birth, then everything ripples behind it, where
Yeah.
then it restructures the home birth, the center birth, and the hospital birth. I hope becomes less, less, and less.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm putting out because I am not that I have all the answers, but I'm a timeline traveler, and the future is really wants nature to come back. And the way we do that is nurturing and loving, and I know maybe I want to hear your story because I know there's a lot to fight against with the world, with the ego, like how dare you, am I allowed to do this? And I have had on my podcast another woman who reached out who shared her whole free birthing on the other side of the world, somewhere in Asia. Now I can't remember. And I want more of those stories because, as I just said, the rippling effect. And there was a client, hopefully they'll come on. I worked with them days before they were ready to give birth. And yeah, there's a lot of energy in there. This couple was like, but they were so connected, and I wasn't worried. I mean, that little baby girl was talking, and I was like, "Oh, this is going to happen sooner than later." And women when they get closer to birth, to me, energetically, they feel very anxious, but not in a negative way. Like, oh, like things are moving, things are happening, and then of course, when that starts to happen, things pop in the mind, right? It's like,
Mm.
oh, what if? And the ebb and flow between that. And but I want to hear, yeah, I'd love to hear as much as you would share the details of your own experience for us.
Mm.
And was it just
Um,
your son or your daughter or both or
well, technically just him because I didn't have any medical, well, the way that I
yeah,
would phrase free birth, it's changed over the years and people like
yeah.
to coin the term and then change the meaning. And to me, it just means birth going back to its default. And to me, having someone that is medically trained is not the default of birth, even in the vicinity. And it's interesting too because I don't know if we want to go here in this conversation, but just tapping into this collective of rave kids that I speak to often, and I see my son as maybe a manifestation of this energy. They are so about, I need to come in with zero imprint, only the imprint of my family. I cannot. They're so sensitive. And their energy is so, I guess I would say pure, that like if anyone is there from that old earth or the old paradigm, which to
Mm.
me is the medicalization, it's going to attempt to put programming on them. And they tell me all the time, even though they're sensitive, um, I don't know, that they can be so sensitive to programming that, let me explain it this way, they kind of, that there becomes a conflict because they almost are unprogrammable, but then there's something that's trying to program them. And so there's like this conflict of energy. Anyway, that's just how I see it.
Can I just
So,
say, wait, as soon as you were saying that, I don't know what just happened, but people will see in a video, a little thumbs up and a bubble
oh,
came. I'm
yeah,
like,
it does that
someone's on our
sometimes.
side. Like, okay. I just want to say that because it will be seen in the video. I'm like, I didn't do anything. We're just like
Zoom
listening. And
does
this,
that sometimes. It's so
I love
weird.
that though, because I feel like they're like, yeah, good conversation.
Keep going. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, yeah, keep going. Exactly.
That's so funny. Yeah, but I guess if I was to say, yeah, so with my daughter, sorry, I was in a midwifery program, and yeah, there's so much to say about that as well because at that time I was like, oh my gosh, like I did have the most incredible home birth and birth with her, but there was absolutely interference, and I had, just like so many women say, I had the incredible midwife who just was making a coffee in the kitchen and basically just came at the end, when she was coming out. So very hands off. But still there was energetic interference. So anyway, when I'm speaking about free birth, I just see it as the default of birth. Like I can't see it any other way. So many people get so political about it. Like it's home birth versus free birth and hospital versus this. No, like it's no one in the free birth community does that.
That's interesting.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
And yeah. So
It
so
is
when you also,
controversial, though. It is. Free birth is controversial.
it is because it just brings up fear within people.
Yes.
And
It's
the
very
way I've
triggering.
yeah, and the way I've always seen it is it brings up fear because it's the most raw expression of our power. And I actually have always seen that's the
Mm.
thing that scares women most out of everything, humans most.
Yeah.
Um, So that was interesting when you were saying it is everything stripped away. That is so true. And that is actually the way that I work with clients, and I did it myself during my pregnancy. Strip everything away, and you actually hear yourself and you actually return to nature. And it just makes sense when everything else that is added on, which, whatever that is, people, programming, even like foods and just getting down to the most pure
Mm.
energy, most natural energy. I think that's what expands your consciousness to see it and go, oh, yeah, like this is what it is. Why would I interfere with this? Like it's
Mm.
already good at its most natural state. So,
Mm. Mm-hmm. I
so yeah. So with him, did you want me to talk about his
I
birth
do,
or
but
talk?
I want to say that something you just said I just talked about on my last podcast was literally the one just like I think the most recent one on circumcision.
Mm,
And
mm.
the and I call it the dabbling of infants. Like your beautiful baby's here. What are we dabbling? Like what are we doing? Like injections and cutting and I know it's a very hot topic. I know it's a very hot topic, but I was like, you know what? I haven't ever really spoke about it and someone asked me to. And but when you said that it reminded me of like your baby is fresh. Here they are into this world. Let's go dabble. Let's poke and prod and inject and put GUIs and I'm like, I feel like, and I know a lot of people will be upset or they want to do that, but it's like, why are you doing that? This is where we have to begin with. It's like nature and connection. Like I remember with my sons, like, he's going to be 14 actually this month. And the midwife was nervous about that. Was like, hey, do you think? And I was like, it never really came to my mind to touch or do anything that would mess nature up
Yeah.
instinctually. Like I just didn't even, I'm like, no, what? Why would I do that? Like, why would I
And
do
what
this? Why would I do that?
Yeah, and what about the energetic message of like you are not perfect and whole as you are as soon as you come into the world? What an
Yeah.
what an imprint to put on a child. Like we have to alter
Yeah.
you because you were not perfect.
Wow. Yeah, that's a
That's
really fascinating, yeah, way that you just said that for sure. And
and
yeah,
and what infuriates me is when I have, tried to have this conversation with even a family member who'd made that
yeah,
decision and I ask the intention because I'm open to the intention. Like
yeah,
if you were given, I don't think you received a message to do it, but if you were,
yeah,
intuitively guided to do that, like, why I was like honestly interested and it was just, no, because I am. I was like, that can't be.
yeah, that can't be right.
It can't be. You would put your child through trauma. Like, yeah, I
And
know. I've
people
got so much.
people disassociate from those things. I've seen it happen.
Yes.
And it's like it's not about, okay, let's maybe it's something that's been done years ago. I feel like we do make mistakes and we have to do better. So,
Yeah.
but it's okay. This is where I feel like some people feel like, but we could still talk about it. Like, let's say you just, you decided to inject or clip or it's like, yeah, that's had to happen and that's sad. And it's not about going back and feeling like a horrible person. It's just going, wow, can we do better? And I didn't get to have that. That's the like empowered human, I feel like, right?
Absolutely, but I don't think that everybody has that level of self-awareness or
Hmm.
even makes space for that reflection. I think that's probably the problem.
Really? Okay.
Well, I don't know. I just see it in
Yeah.
my life all the time. It just reminded me of
Yeah.
I feel like even sometimes I just blow people's paradigms apart and I don't even mean to. I'm not meaning to. And this is an example. The other the other day, so we have Medicare here in Australia and I'm not about the system, but I'm so grateful we have that because it pays for most of our medical stuff. And anyway, we have a card attached to that. And so my son's 6, but he's not on the card. So I said, I need to put my son on the card. And she goes, what, did you just have a baby? I said, no, 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 no. He's 6. And she goes, 6? But
Yeah.
what she could not fathom that he'd never been to the doctor. And she goes, what about his immunizations? I said, oh no, I didn't know. I didn't put that in him. And she's her eyes, I just saw her mind like
You're so
explode, like,
confused.
I'm so confused. I don't understand. This isn't right. This isn't how it's supposed to be. And I was like, oh, but then I get a little bit of fear because I move into that witch wound of like, oh yeah, I forgot. This is actually dangerous. This can be actually dangerous to speak like
Yeah.
this in
Yeah.
a society that is so
Yeah.
terrified of the opposite. And I just retracted straight away. But I didn't even
Yeah.
mean to. I just must have been in my bubble too long of like-minded people and go out into the world
Well,
and then whoa.
you bring up something that it's so funny with my second born, he didn't have a birth certificate
Yeah,
for almost till he was 1. And now I know,
same as him.
I could have got him a passport, no birth certificate, no social security number. I didn't know this till recently, like studying. I was like, oh, so I brought him to, the conventional doctor. And I'm a very strong anchor and I have that medical history. So I'm like, I'm not wavering. I'm not putting any weird energy out. Nobody's convincing me. And the
Mm,
doctor actually was very much, she was for me, which was weird. I'm sure for other people she isn't, but she knew I was like nursing, and I think she felt me and my husband's energy was very strong. So I brought him in and I said, "Oh, I just yeah, I need you to fill out his first visit." And they're like, the nurses were like, what? They were, you can see the wheels turning like, well, his first visit? I'm like, yeah, when someone's born, but it's like 10 months later. I just need the paper because I need to get some information. I just need the paper, just fill out the paper. And then I could tell it was like, and they're like, oh, so this is the first time. I'm like, yeah. And I see the thing with me is that I can reshift and change molecules of energy with people. So I don't open up to anything weird. So they're not trying to convince me, they're not trying to do anything. And so I can see their energy. And I'm like, I'm a shapeshifter. I'm playing with the energy without words. And
mm,
and it's not like hard. It's really effortless. It's just what I think I've always done that. But in those environments, I'm just like, just like quiet, confident, like, probably underneath a little, like if I feel triggered, it could be there, but
yeah,
it was hilarious. And that's why I made my husband go with me because it's like a team, right? And
yeah,
but they were like, yeah, the woman's face, it was like, it's just priceless because yeah, I don't still think she really understood it. And then
yeah.
the doctor picks up my son. She starts, I don't know, twirling around. She's not even doing anything. And she's like, wow, he's got a strong head he was strong body and he was so beautiful. And I'm thinking, yeah, she didn't have to give me any conversation about what he needed up to date, nothing, just nothing. And that's really rare, by the way. Nothing. Just like,
Mm.
oh, I have another kid. They're all healthy. I'm like, yeah, everything's good. And I was like, oh, all right, yeah, great. Like she in her business suit, by the way. I've never seen doctors dressed up in a business suit,
Oh,
but
so
it was
different,
given, yeah, it was through insurance, and we're like, oh, might as well try it out. And I don't like all that stuff either. And it's
different
like,
branding, going for a different
yeah,
branding. Yeah.
different like
I
heels and everything. Like, okay. I don't
Yeah, I
know.
see that. Well, I see that the old system is crumbling, so I see
Yeah.
them gripping onto it 100%. And
Yeah.
I hear what you say too, Kelly, because I felt myself, like I said, kind of move into that fear zone. And I know there's nothing good in that place for that interaction. So I can quickly, as well, if I'm conscious enough,
Yeah.
flip it into that lightness and the curiosity, because
Mm.
otherwise I have seen that manifest into a situation.
Yeah, I've seen
So,
people do that too, and they get fighting. It's like you
yeah.
can't go there to fight. You go, you're an authentic souled being. You know who you are. You know what you want. Just write it down that paper. Let's move
Yeah.
on. Like, give me,
Yeah.
I'm like you're not my patient alone. I am your client that's kind of like involved. It's like you don't, I'm paying you somehow. Do you know what I'm saying? It's not like I'm
Yeah.
coming. And so it's just funny. There was really no words because I'm not going to sit there and explain everything to everybody, right? You
Yeah. Yeah.
know,
Well,
it's
that's,
like
yeah.
it's
If
a
I
home. We
can
just like it's a home birth. We got caught up in life. Now we're here.
Yeah.
Okay, that's it.
If I
All
can
right.
quickly find, if I can quickly find the timeline where, for example, that woman goes home instead or and goes, oh, that's interesting. Yeah, okay, I see that. And like it expands her a little,
Well,
I
maybe
try and
it
anchor
did.
into that.
Maybe it
Yeah,
did
that's how I try
though.
and anchor
You don't
into it.
even, yeah, I like that. So then they're going, I actually had same, I think it was the same facility with my son at some point, and I was telling the nurse was pregnant and I told her about acupuncture. She goes, I've never heard of that. I was like, wow. And she's like, in pregnancy, I'm like, absolutely. I'm no acupuncturist, but I was like, lady, I want to be like, get with it. Get with it. What are you acupuncture is just like that's like normal care here nowadays. Like, but
Yeah.
I know I created a ripple in her thought space for a moment, and I could tell she thought there was danger or uncertainty in it. But like you
Yeah.
said, it's the frequency of those environments. That's fine. That's just where they're at. But sometimes, things get you ping your own energy in there and you kind of know. It sounds like you knew. You're like, okay, what's this going to look like? And
Yeah, and that
uh,
was one thing I was massive on with both of my pregnancies because to me it felt natural and normal, but I could sense from the outside world that there was a lot of fear, and I was just adamant that nobody's fear was going to intervene with these experiences. And so, yeah, there was like physical boundaries that I had to put in there too, energetic boundaries, but also I had to really work on keeping the frequency high because I know that there are timelines available where I know women where like we have a system here called DOCS, which is like our child protection services,
okay.
where they have been called on women that are free birth, like
Wow.
in our local area. It's like a thing that happens, and that would have just been my worst nightmares of any mother's worst nightmare. So I had to really anchor into the highest timeline continually, like this is how it manifests. This is the visual of
Hmm.
yeah, the best case scenario rather than the worst case scenario. Just so
Yeah.
intentional about where I was putting my energy. I think
So
that's just so important.
tell us more about your son. Like, give us as much as you'll share. I don't know.
Yeah. During pregnancy or now or
Well, when you came into the birth, like what did that look like? Let's like paint a picture for the audience here. Like some may be so like unsure of rebirth or maybe they're doing it. What was your experience like in that?
yes, well, I was asleep and our daughter was in between us. And I had always had this vision I was going to go out to this house we lived in had a big back room and you could see the gum trees and it had a beautiful backyard. And my vision was going out into this big room and doing it there and maybe even by myself. I just really wanted to just like
Mm.
be, yeah, just with myself doing it. And as soon as I felt like, yeah, some contractions, just my intuition was like, absolutely not. It's too cold out there, too big, too exposed.
Yeah.
So I think I went to the bathroom, then I came back in and I did this with my daughter as well. build an altar if I don't already have one. Well, I had an altar out into that in that room, so I'm like, well, I need to rebuild it here. So I built altars in my pregnancy. Sorry, in my labors. So I built this altar and I had the candles, and then so Reese woke up at some stage, and he just woke up to like oils and sage and candles and all the stuff, and he's like, okay. And so I just started, yeah, I just started laboring, and for some reason I like to kind of lean over kind of whatever is there, like the furniture that's there. But that's pretty much what, that's how it opened up. Like I don't know, with both labors, so weird. I was like, oh, am I though? I don't know what that's about. Like, am I really in labor? Of course
Mm,
I am. This weird kind of thing that comes in my mind. So I stayed in our bedroom, which was pretty small, but it was very cozy with the candles and the heater, and it was in the middle of winter in a very cold house. Um, and I just started laboring. I just started moving through my surges. And so his birth was 3 hours. So, yeah, it didn't take very long, and it was very intense. And so with my daughter, I had a birth pool, and like I said, she's very like to the book, how do you do a home birth, inverted commas. And with him, he's just so raw. Like I ended up in the shower. Like I even thought about filling up the bath, because that does feel good in labor. And it was
mm.
like, no, there's no time. So at some point, I moved from, oh, actually, I don't want to skip that part, because before I got to the shower was um, some really like profound moments. Um, they were extremely intense, like the surges, like where I was like at times up on my toes, even whilst really diving into them and saying, give me all you've got type
Mm,
energy. Like, I'm not going to run away from you. I know what running away from birth does. It just
mm,
chases you all around the house, all around, all around the spaces in your mind. Just go into it. And so they were extremely intense. I was up on my toes, and my daughter had woken up by this point. But there was a moment I'm going to say it was maybe the second last or the last contraction I had before I moved into the shower and my water broke, um, where it was just maybe it was transition, right? Just that moment of like, oh gosh, like this is massive. And I always feel like transition is when you drop back into your body and do this quick scan of like, am I safe for this baby to come? I always see that as what transition is. And so when you come properly back into the body, that's when you're like, holy, the reality of birth maybe comes
oh,
in. That's how
yeah.
I've experienced it. And I've heard clients talk about that too. So it was like, holy shit, this is massive. This is intense. And there was just like this voice, like, just let her take you. And I get goosebumps when I think of it. Just let her
Mm,
take you. And I saw this, like, maybe the mid space that I talk about, this like blackness,
mm,
veil, whatever. And I was just like, I'm just going to walk straight into it. And
mm.
I just kind of visually walked straight into it. And then I either had one more, or that's when I actually, after that contraction, I like had some blood, and I had that with my daughter as well. And I was like, oh, it's go time soon. It's just how my body maybe
Mhm.
does it. I don't know. Um, but in saying that, I don't like to say there's similarities between labors, because they're all so different in their expression. But that was, yeah, something that was the same. So I moved into the shower. And with him, my belly was really, really expanded, really big. So I went into the shower. I just knew, like, go into the shower for whatever reason. I don't need to have a reason. I just follow the intuition. And my water broke. And that's when Reese like hopped out of bed, because he was like, what was that? He said it sounded like a fire hose in the shower, just like,
Oh.
and oh my gosh, the relief. And that water breaking was his head slamming straight into like ready, like right there. Um, yeah, so gosh, I would have only had a few more contractions when I was in the shower.
Were you
And
standing up or sitting down?
I was at the beginning, um, but then I went down on all fours, and
Mm.
I actually, like, it was the smallest shower. The next day, I was like, why are my hands and my knees
Oh,
so sore?
yeah.
Why had my hands straight on the
Yeah.
straight on the metal track
Gripping,
with him.
gripping, you working out.
Just
Labor. It's
resting
called
my whole,
labor.
yeah, just like, yeah, truly hard work. Like just resting my whole
Yeah,
body probably on my knees and my hands
yeah,
on this metal bit, which was like, well, I didn't even care in the moment.
of
But
course.
yes, I was on all fours. Um, and yeah, then it didn't take very much for him to to come out. It was maybe one more
Wow.
contraction and he flew out, like to the point where Reese reckons he grabbed a towel and quickly, because he was like, "Have you got him?" I'm like, "Yeah." But like my belly was so
Where is
big.
he?
Well, I couldn't even physically reach under. I was so like my
Yeah, I
belly was.
wonder about that because I couldn't do that either.
I think if you're like
I see women do it on Instagram, all these videos, and I'm like, okay, maybe they have different flexibility and
about to
different
say,
fascia. I think we have different
listen, I'm not
fascia.
very flexible. Yeah, yeah. That is something that I have to constantly work on, like muscle and fascia flexibility. So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, in the right position, maybe.
I actually appreciate you saying that because I'm like, I hear a lot of these videos or see things like catch your own baby, catch your own baby. And I was like, when I had my son on the birthing stool, I was like, no, I was like, that baby's just gonna fly on the floor and be like slip and slide. I was like, unless somebody else, and actually the midwife helped my husband hold him. So he was
Yeah,
his first contact. Otherwise, I was like, and I felt like it was in another reality for me. It was like really, I was like, maybe if I was alone somewhere, I'd probably lay on the floor like a cat or a dog,
yeah,
right? And then know how to position myself in a way that the baby, and I know babies are pretty resilient. We don't give babies enough credit, but
yeah. Well, I think also when you're really anchoring into being, so birth can flow through you
Mhm.
versus doing, it's like switching back into
Yeah,
another mindset to go, oh, okay, I've got to do this maybe as well. Well,
yeah,
for me, maybe.
yeah. That's
So Reese grabbed
interesting.
a folded up towel and like threw it under me. And he reckons the moment he threw it under, like it's so intuitively, um, that he slipped out. And so my
Mm.
daughter, I really want to mention this. My daughter was there and oh gosh, she was so beautiful. She, even when I was laboring in the bedroom, she was like, "You okay, mummy?" And I was like, "Yeah, I didn't
Oh,
I don't want her to have that programming of fear around birth." And so I was like,
yes.
"Yeah, yeah, I'm just working hard. Like I'm just um you know what it's like when you're in a situation in motherhood, even if you're in pain, you're like smiling, like, yeah, yeah, I'm good. It's all
Oh,
good. Like you
yeah.
can switch out of it. Anyway, so when he came out, my daughter, this is the other really cool thing. On the altar, I had this beautiful sphere crystal, and we didn't realize she'd grabbed it off the altar and was holding it,
Mm,
watching me birth her brother. We didn't see it until we looked at the photos later, and I was like, oh my gosh. Anyway,
mm.
so she went, baby's here.
Oh my gosh.
So she
It's a
was two.
celebration.
Well, she was
That's
excited. There was no
powerful for two. Wow.
that proved to me that fear of birth is just programming. It's not innately a thing that we fear. If a child can be there and be like feel the excitement, also we didn't have fear. And that's important too. But she was just, this is normal. And also I did watch videos with her also, so that if she saw blood and whatever, that she would be like, oh, cool, that's
Mm,
normal. Like,
mm,
um, so she's like, baby's here. And he actually had the cord around his neck. So I don't remember this bit. I thought I picked him up, but Reese says he did, and I believe him because I don't remember this bit. But he picked him up and gave him to me. And he actually took some time to transition. And this was interesting because it was one of the fears I had to face in pregnancy. And
mm,
I think that's important to say too, because I think that people, maybe even women, think that women free birth because they're fearless of birth or they don't have anything that comes up. But in fact,
mm,
it's all there. We all grew up with the same programming, probably, just had to do the work to face it and look at it and play out worst case scenarios and like really go into those shadowy places. And so that was something that had come up for me about like I don't even know I don't want to call it a delayed transition because it's not, it's quite normal,
mm.
for them to transition to breathing with their lungs. And
Yeah.
so anyway, I unwrapped the cord around his neck, which again, a nuchal cord is quite a common thing. If you think about a baby moving around in there and yeah, and I also like both pregnancies like created quite a short cord for some reason. I don't know. I'm short. I don't know if that's
Thing. Yeah.
yeah, so I unraveled that. And he took a little bit and he was a little bit he was floppy and he wasn't pink. And I I don't want to say I wasn't scared. I was confident. I trusted him. I heard his voice again of trust me,
Yeah.
mum. It
Hmm.
came in again. I was like, I trust you. And I just like was just
Rubbed
kind
him
of rubbing
and
him
yeah,
just
yeah.
instinctively. And then I'll have to share this photo with you. Just
Yeah.
before he started breathing, he had this huge smile. Like
Hmm.
it was almost like I'm freaking here. Like sorry, excuse the French, but I'm here. That was what it was like. Like, I'm good. I'm here. Um, and which is just so him anyway. Like he's a little smiley Leo, like with his
Mm.
big energy. And he had a smile before he took his first big breath. And I was like, yeah, thank you. Like he's good. And then and then he cried. And I actually just thought of something, which I don't even know if I've mentioned this before. And it's so crazy because I kind of should have. But I was thinking about my short cord.
Mm.
I have like a really like a not a great back. I have quite severe scoliosis. Not severe like I've seen other
Oh,
people, but
interesting.
I have
Yeah.
yeah, what I've been told is severe by the
Huh.
medical system, but I've also seen people with much worse. So it is twisted. It's an S, but it's also twisted in the middle. So I was told when I was younger, this was part of my, inner work as well, that I would probably not be able to conceive. And if
Wow.
I did, which is ridiculous, like, and if I did, I'd never be able to have a natural birth. Um,
Wow.
and so I guess I was
Wow.
just thinking,
That your body created that cord because that's
maybe,
where your spine and your body was, which I think I know where we're going with this. I totally understand what you mean because when you were talking, there's a lot of interesting parallels in my experience where I think I have a really strong placentas with my children because my
mm,
water doesn't break until I push.
yeah,
It just doesn't break. And in the first year, and it made me think the first time the midwife in my first birth, I can wear a coat and I didn't look pregnant. Like I could cover it. And she said, wow, it's really tight. Your muscles are really tight. So there was something about the structure of my body where the second, I think it was more, and so when you said that about like every birth is different, but the similarities, like I think if I kept having kids, my water would not break until, right, biologically, it just wouldn't break until I pushed. That's me. Right? It's
yeah.
like I'm really convinced of that. And then my son was at the birth of his brother, and it is really
Oh,
beautiful to have children
yeah.
there. He was older and he came in right as he came out, but and they say such beautiful things. And it's very normal to like see nature. And my son was like first he was like, there's a baby in there for real. And he's like, it shot out like a rocket ship. Such a boy thing to say.
Yeah.
And then hours later, he holds him for the first time and he starts crying. And then he goes, I don't know why I'm crying. And then I start
Oh,
crying. I'm like,
oh,
and then my husband's like, what's happening? Everybody's crying. We're all just like,
oxytocin.
yeah, we're all like, oh my gosh. And in the bed in the summer, it was just like so amazing, but it was hard and intense. That people don't realize that. It's not just, there's a lot, but the cord, I want to really feature what you said about the cord because
Mm,
I hear this so much. And I'm like a birth advocate, a self-studier of the outside world of midwifery. Like I'm not in that space, but I've
mm,
learned a lot by listening and hearing different medical midwives. And it's like this cord thing that people have no idea about. They automatically go into danger.
yeah.
And I'm like, what is that? It's just like so big. Like, I had the cord, Kelly, and I almost died. Or my kid had the cord, and I'm like, whoa. Did they really
Yeah.
almost die? I'm not going to say that there aren't dangerous things that can happen, but I'm like, wow, is it totally dangerous to be born, everybody? Like, what are we doing here? That's the
Yeah, it's
story, right?
interesting that we survived as a human race if birth is innately dangerous. Like that's a bit weird,
Yeah.
isn't it? Yeah,
And
well,
and
that
then
is the narrative.
even you talked about, rubbing and like I've heard babies are in and out for a while and maybe they're not fully breathing. Like it's like look, they're in this watery world and now they're here, but people automatically go into danger.
Yeah. And it showed me so much as well. Like, and well, if I was in hospital, I know what they would have done. They would have cut the cord when he was floppy, and then they would have cut his oxygen that he was getting from my body, which is like, first of all, so
Yeah.
dangerous. And that's that intervention that can create
Yeah.
more problems rather than trusting the baby. Um, and I'm, moving through having to be associated with the medical system over the last couple of
Mm.
months, I've developed a new level of compassion where I always had this anyway, but they honestly, I mean, it's not intentional to hurt someone, obviously, but they
Yeah.
honestly think they are doing the right thing. They honestly do. They are trying to help when they're even maybe hurting. Um, so
Because
anyway,
they're, it's because how I see it is they're like giving this information and we're not questioning this information. It's just
yeah,
the book. We're passing the book down.
yeah,
And to think outside of that, I know can be very challenging. And I've talked to many doctors. I have a doctor friend and she is very by the book. And I questioned like, hey, I said something, I threw a little ripple out there because I was like, I'm just gonna say it. And I heard a blankness from that energy. I heard I don't have an answer for her because it's not in the book.
yeah, yeah.
And it's fine. Like she's an amazing woman and she is who she is. But I'm like you, I'm like creating the ripples, not because I have to, because I just feel like I'm like, like, oh, why are we dabbling with the infant? Like this is like we are
Yeah.
really meant to come back to nature. But I hear what you're saying. And I think when we see that compassionate lens, but there is a sense of ignorance, like just and again, that sounds so negative, but there kind of is. But it's like I'm going to follow this one way because that's what I'm taught. And that's
Oh,
there's
yeah.
nothing else.
There's a
There's
lack
nothing
of
else.
questioning. There's a
Yeah.
lack of questioning, but I also do believe on some level there is a choice not to question it because no, things are just
Yeah.
going fine. Like this works for me and I'm just going to do it. So that's what I have a bit of trouble with.
Yeah.
But but yeah, if I was in the hospital, I know how it would have gone down and I know it would have ended up a certain way. And I was just thinking also about the umbilical cord and well, it just so many things. It showed me also how just a next level understanding of the intelligence of the body and looking back at photos and videos when I was pregnant with him, especially. So with
Mm,
my scoliosis, my right hip
mm,
is out, and if I sit a natural way, my shoulders are slanted as well. And
mm,
my belly in this video is completely off center to the left. And I'm like,
mm.
so even though I am built this way, my
Yeah.
body, getting someone coming in. Off you go. Yes, you can have those. Can you close the door, please? One sec.
It's okay.
Could hear him coming.
I love this. I'm going to talk while it's a little quiet. It's just our bodies know how to build our babies.
Yeah.
If you're 6 feet tall, guess what? You're going to have a big baby. I knew a couple, they were both over 6 feet tall and they had a big baby, and that's normal and natural. Like that's how that works.
Right. Well, it's all about again like that individual expression of nature.
Yes.
So, and that's how birth is as well. So it doesn't fit the medical model because they're not open to variations of normal. And my body was such a metaphor of that as well, an example of that for me, because I was like, my body is a variation of normal, whatever normal is,
Mm.
which is why I've never put my children on any of those scales where they have, their growth and whatever, because they're all individual expressions. They're completely different. Um, yeah, my body is a variation of normal. And still, because it is like I am physiologically able to have a child because I'm a woman, it adapts, like nature adapts.
I love that.
Yeah, so
You make
that
me
was,
think about this some another similarity we have. I didn't do doctor visits at all. And someone would say, "Oh my kid or my baby's in the percentile." I was like, "I don't even know what that means." I was like, I'm
yeah,
like,
that.
because I would have people, older generations that they'd look and go, "Oh, oh, he's getting tall. Does that sound about right?" And I said, "I don't know." I'm like, he's got a tall mom and a short dad. I said, we'll see what happens. And I think people probably just like, oh, okay. But it's just so funny. Like the things you're sharing is so like, this is why we're like, we gotta have tea. I was like, we have like so many similarities. But
Well, can you imagine like if women return to that maternal instinct instead of the more scientific approach to their children's development and nurturing them and like yeah, what you just said is so similar to what I experienced where people would say, you know, oh, has the child health nurse come out? Like, how do you know he's growing? And I said,
yeah.
because I've put the next because I put the next size what do you call it? Romper on
Yeah.
him.
Yeah, I'm like I'm nursing my son and he looks pretty chunky and then I had a friend who she was going to visits, wasn't doing any injections, but they were like, "Oh, he's so small, he's so thin." And I said, "You know what? You and your husband are small, thin people.
Right.
What do you expect your kid? I'm a little robust here with my Filipino husband. That's a Pacific Islander. They're more robust. So yeah, my baby's gonna be more on the bigger side. So I was like, you gotta look at and she didn't because they scare you. They scare
Yeah.
you and like no, unless there's some severe mental illness or trauma, no one's starving their baby. And I
Right.
know I feel like, maybe people don't realize when your baby's born, they're gonna lose weight.
Yeah,
And
that
that's like
happens too.
normal. And I'm no like scientist. I'm like, yeah, like that's just what happens. And I want to make this clear because maybe people are tuning in saying, "Hey, well, you have a background of all this science." And I'm thinking right now, the many women that I've worked with Freebirth had zero background in any midwifery or doula or anything. They did their own search and work around it because I'm sure people are like, "Hey, do you know what I'm saying? Like
Yes.
that it's for anybody. Does that come up with you at times?
Yeah, I remember writing a
Okay.
post a few years ago and I wrote, "How qualified are you?" No, what did
Yeah.
I write?
That's a good title.
How how qualified are you in birth? I think I said. I'll have to find it. And I wrote in years or lifetimes. Like,
Mm,
innate wisdom or in what's in a book or yeah, that d does it come up for me that people assume that I'm a midwife and question like when I'm supporting other women? A hundred
yeah,
percent. Yes, the midwifery community is not my biggest fan, for
I'm
many
sure.
reasons. And
Yeah.
like all I can come back to is I am on the side of women. I am also on their side. I want
Yeah.
them to not be oppressed in the system they're working in. I want them to wake up to the innate wisdom of birth and lose the medical approach to it. And it doesn't
Mm,
matter if they're a spiritually inclined home birth midwife. It doesn't matter. There is still
yeah.
programming there that you must be
Yes.
anchored into within the old earth and the medical version of birth. If you are still a part of that system, like you can't, you have to be outside of it to break free from it. So, yeah,
Because
I do
yeah.
often have people ask me if I'm a midwife, and I say, absolutely not.
You're like,
No.
I'm a midwitch. Well, I want to say that speaking from like American culture, I know it's different in different areas, that what I've heard in the midwifery world from friends that are midwives and that became midwives and other midwives, they're a little iffy about the free birth. You already know. They're a little like, I don't know if it feels like because they're in a system or it's a threat or what it is, but I notice it comes up. And
Well,
I'm
what
like,
happens if
huh.
every woman on earth free births?
Yeah.
That makes them obsolete in their mind.
Yeah.
They don't have to. They could be there supporting them in a different way, but in
Yeah.
the paradigm they're in and in the role that they're in, it does make that that's, I mean,
And
is
I
that
do
true?
see there's two women that pop in my head and they're awesome. Oh, these women are they're doing big things in the energy, spiritual birth world. They both were trained in midwifery, but they set it aside and are in like assisting. One of them is assisting free birth if needed, like those kind of, but not like practicing under certain, I guess there's certain language and rules around that. And the other person's more like teaching. And I'm like, because it's like they probably were pushed out for their views or their connection. And I see that. And I see those people, maybe they're pioneers on some level or and they've been probably pitchforked and fire thrown but I'm going wow but now I think there's more I actually think there's more respect now. Do you feel like there's more respect? I feel like 10 years ago unassisted birth, shh. Now it's like free birth. You see, groups starting and people are, I've had on my podcast, they were all hiding before. Nobody wanted to do it. So yeah, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think so. When I free birthed my son, so he's 6,
Hmm.
and I didn't know a single person that had done it, and there weren't any courses. There was one Facebook group, there wasn't anything. I bought books and I did what I always do when I'm walking into the unknown. I anchored even more deeply into my spiritual practice and spirituality. That's what's always been the foundation or guided me through anything
Hmm.
that because I've done that a lot. I've taken a lot of different paths that are off the main road, off mainstream, away from mainstream choices. But yeah, there wasn't a lot. But there was some. Indie Birth, so Maren from Indie Birth, she had been talking about it for a while. So in the US, there was a few things that I found, but they were quite like not underground. You just had to really search to find them.
Yeah.
And now I see women becoming more vocal about it, which I think is, yeah, I think it's amazing because why shouldn't women be able to share their stories? Um, I still didn't feel like I could share my story
Yeah.
when I had my son. Even when family came to visit me, they did not want to know. They didn't ask one thing about the birth. They didn't want to know.
Wow.
They were just like, don't want to know about it. And that was so
People get so
heartbreaking.
scared. They're just scared. Is that why? What is that?
Yeah, it's a narrative of like, oh, this sentence of like, well, you don't have to be a hero.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it's I don't know. Just too much for them, I suppose, to be able
Yeah.
to even grasp. It
To even like digest it, like what? Yeah, yeah,
just blew apart their paradigm. But also, they believed it was dangerous. I absolutely could sense that on them. They believed that
yeah,
I made a dangerous choice, which is
yeah,
wild to me because choosing to go to the hospital, I believe, is one of the most dangerous choices. I truly believe that. That place and what happens in that place,
yeah.
especially in our local hospital, is yeah, I mean, it's abuse, honestly,
Wow.
whether it's intentional or not intentional. It is to me a dangerous place for a mother and baby to be.
Yeah,
Um, Especially because when you're in labor, you cannot protect yourself. And I've just, like I
yeah.
said, with Reese breaking his leg and having to be in that system and in the hospital, you
Mm.
need to protect yourself. You do. Like, and so when you're in labor, I mean, I know
Yeah,
that's where
it's so
doulas,
vulnerable. Yeah. I
yeah, I
tell
know.
like my clients that are pregnant when they come for a pregnancy session and some I have repeats, which is fun. I always feel like the conception, unless there's some really severe pregnancy fears, I work more with conception because they're like creating, but in the pregnancy space, I always like beg women now, are you having a hospital birth? Please have a doula. Please, please, please. Oh, center birth, home birth. Oh, cool. You can have a doula, but I'm not begging you to do that because it feels like I'm not trying to be negative. It feels like a war and a fight in that density. And I feel like hospitals are for sick people. And it is a very low frequency. And I know people, I've said this before, and it's not to minimize or hurt people's feelings. I had a home birth transfer with my first, and I went back into a low traumatic density that needed to be a part of the story of my life
Mm.
because it was
Hmm.
unhealed, unresolved stuff. But
Yeah.
it just is like I don't care. Like we're going into these places. I mean, I don't know about you. You walk into the hospital. I feel like I got to hold my breath, keep my
Yeah.
energy.
And
My body gets. There's so much happening.
I have to say, I don't even think a doula is enough. I know that's supposed to be their
Mm,
role. And just touching on when I was speaking about doing my hypnobirthing training, they were actually um, part of that became like training the father to be that, like the security guard. But I
mm,
don't think a doula, I don't think that works either. I don't think they can do anything. And I experienced that in the last couple of weeks. I was almost like Reese's doula, and a
wow.
surgeon came in to speak to him and I watched the power play, and I'm quite in my power. And he came in and spoke to Reese, and he looked at me and he goes, "And you are?" And I said, "I'm
Oh
Anita." And he
wow.
said, "Yeah, but who are you?" And I was like, "I
Ooh.
see what you're doing. You're trying to dominate me immediately so I don't
Yeah.
question you." That going down in birth,
Yeah.
like maybe the doula wins and the mother gets something she wants, but that energy when you're trying to allow birth in, that just doesn't work. And I want to say, like, in a true emergency, I do believe that's what the medical system is there for. I've just experienced it with Reese, but
Yes.
I think that I think that it's just the default to go there without emergency, and yeah, I don't know, I can't see it as
No, something I feel like I want to say this out loud because I've said this before and I want to say it that you are a patient or a client, you are paying, even if it's through insurance, you are paying them for a service. You are
yeah,
paying them to help you do what you want to do with their expertise, but you are allowed to say no. And your no has to be respected. Again, you are paying them. You are paying. It's not like, oh, I'm going and do whatever you want. That's the old way. And it's just so appalling that you go in there and it's like, yeah, the power, you saw it. Who are you? And it's like, what does that even have to do with anything? But it's that energy of like, because we do have to be, as I call our own health authorities. And
yeah,
I opened up a Mighty Network group that's called Intuitive Healthcare. And it's slow to start, but I'm in there like, how do we become our own health advocates, please, people?
yeah,
And what is the earth saying to us? What is our own intuition? What is medical intuition? I'm like bringing all that in together because that is the future. Like, we can't, keep selling people like what is it? I'm not going to say it right. Is it called euthogenics, something genics, saying it's like the second cause of death in the world. It's like, don't quote me on this, maybe it's changed, but it's death by doctors of surgeries
oh
and
yeah,
medications.
yeah. Iatrogenic, is it? Yeah, I've seen that word too. I think
I don't
this
know
is
the word. It's slipping in my mind right now. Yeah, you know what I'm talking
this,
about. The death
yeah,
by medical care and establishment.
malpractice.
Yeah, because
Yeah,
people are going to the doctor all the time for little
yeah,
things that are
yeah,
emotional. It's emotional.
yeah.
It's like I had my hair lady once a long time ago. She was like, Kelly, what do you think? My boyfriend is having these chronic issues in his bowels and he's getting all these cameras and things shoved in there. And then she's asking me, and I'm literally feeling the energy of his father. And I says, well,
Oh
he's
yeah.
gonna, without getting detailed with people, unless they really want to know, I'm like, well, he's got to do the emotional work. You can get prodded pills and cameras, and they're like, everything's fine, but you're suffering. I'm like, it's emotional. And
And then talk about that kind of invasiveness creating more problems. I just
mm-hmm,
wanted to
mm-hmm,
say, like, and this has become even more solidified within me, but my truth is that to be a health advocate has to happen well before you're in their place. That is their house. And I know that we can try and stand in our power, but I actually believe it's a greater force that like, I think that when you're in there, you have to surrender to the most part. They're not giving up that fight. Like that is their house. It's almost like if you walk through the doors, it's their rules, and you can try and negotiate, and you might have a little bit of movement, but I don't know. I feel like it's a
mm,
force that is way bigger than one person. Like when I was in there, I just saw like, gosh, lifetimes
mm.
of energy that you're up against. And so I don't mean that you're completely powerless. I just think it's important for people to know that if you're choosing to go there and it's not like an emergency, you're in their house. And I think maybe that comes from when I was doing the hypnobirthing training and they were like, you can say no and you can choose this and you can turn the lights out and you can give them your birth plan. And not most birthing women will tell you that they don't give a shit about that. They're like, you're in my house. I'll pretend to
Wow.
acknowledge that.
Yeah.
Well, in Australia anyway, and in
Okay.
especially in our local hospital, we'll tell you what you want to hear.
Wow. Okay.
But we're going to coerce you and scare the living daylights out of you so we change your mind because it's our house. You walked in here. And
Wow.
I know that we pay them, but I don't think that's their perception. And it's a culture. So even if there are like a few different people that work there, it's still like it's a
You're right,
culture.
though. I know it's not their perception, but that's what I'm anchoring in.
Yeah.
It's something that's come in more clear is like, I'm paying you. I'm the authority.
Mm,
And that could be very American minded too, but you're right. I've heard some really intense things about where you live in certain medical, birthing, conception, fertility, even clinics and communities. And it
yeah.
sounds like it's always a fight. Not to say that there's not a fight here, but I think that I really want to create that synergy of like, you are the one in command no matter what. Like, but I do
Yeah,
think
no,
it's going to take time But I
Yeah.
hear what you're saying, and I think that's very valuable. Yeah, like the way you just said that about the house, like you're in my house.
I think
In my
health sovereignty
space.
just has to start a long time before then. Like I think anchoring
Yeah.
to health sovereignty. I think doctor's office maybe is like different. It's you and
Yeah.
yeah, I totally like I want to believe that as well. It's not been what
Yeah.
I've witnessed, but I do think we have to give like especially women
Yeah.
the reminder that they have the power, but I don't know, I feel like their power could be expressed in, on another timeline in a different way, like without having to enter their house, the medical system's
Yeah.
house.
I love that. And I want to share, we're coming to the end here. Just any like, how people can find you, connect with your work, and any final like love message to the powerful women of the world.
Oh gosh. I mean, maybe this sounds negative, but I do. I mean, I see the power that other women hold within themselves. And I do see that there is an agenda in this world to keep women separated from that. And I do think that even like speaking about the power of a woman, the power of a mother, even so. And so can you come back to your heart and what, the wisdom in your heart as a mother and what is like innately within you and remember that power within you? Maybe even with the light consciousness that, oh, maybe some things are trying to separate me from that. Maybe it's, not in my best, they're not, this person's not acting in my best interest. Um, like I said, I don't know if that sounds very positive. I just wish women would wake up to their power and realize how powerful they are. I mean, humans in general, really, but especially mothers and especially in the birth and motherhood continuum. Um, yeah.
So how can we get a hold of your podcast and your website and whatever else, your Instagram? Share more with us about that.
Yeah. So my Instagram is the Midwitch and my podcast is the Midwitch Podcast. Um, I've just opened my books for my spiritual prenatal care, which most people would know as the intuitive birth method that I've been running for years. But the last couple of years, I've only taken private referrals, and not advertise it publicly. But there's been this big call to advertise it publicly again. So, yeah, I've opened that up as well. So if women are interested in that, to get in touch. So I do that online and in person. There was just a funky energy there the last couple of years around the birth space. So I kind of just, yeah, it felt safer for me to just work with clients that were referrals, like someone refers someone privately. Um, yeah, so that's where women can find me.
Excellent. Anita, thank you so much for being here and sharing.
Thank you for having me on.
This was great. Yes. And I want to thank you all for joining Owning Your Birth and the Freedom to Align with New Earth Consciousness, February 2025. Thank you for joining Spirit Baby Radio with your host, me, Kelly Meehan. Please join my community and stay in touch with monthly energy rants, Spirit Baby poetry, and get access to Spirit Baby 101 with tips and practices at my newsletter at newearthchildren.com. And join me on Instagram with lives at Spirit Baby Medium, and join the Mighty Networks, the Spirit Baby Collective membership, and Motherhood to Mediumship. Remember, you are the heart that holds communication, and it is your time to connect. Come share in the great shift of your mind and the true spirit of your heart with Spirit Baby Communication.